join a movement to save our planet?
Yeah, the question we want to try and answer is, what does COVID-19 have to do with the environment? And what should we be doing about it as a campaign? Can people hear me all right? Yeah. So me, Dana, and Patrick are putting forward the argument that agribusinesses are playing a fundamental role in the spread of deadly viruses like COVID-19. So I'm going to talk about why that's the case, and then Patrick is going to talk about agribusinesses on a wider scale as part of the environmental crisis and the global capitalist economy. So to begin, the EcoHealth Alliance, which is an organization that tracks the spread of diseases across the globe, said that nearly 1 in 3 outbreaks of new and emerging diseases are linked to land use change, such as deforestation. 70% of disease-causing pathogens discovered in the last 50 years have been zoonotic, meaning they came from animals. COVID-19, or the coronavirus, is the latest in a long list of zoonotic viruses, including Ebola, the Nipah virus, swine flu, the Zika virus, and many more, which have jumped from animals to humans. There is a handy quote from the National Geographic that gives us an idea of how deforestation allows zoonotic viruses to emerge. Quote, in 1997, clouds of smoke hung over the rainforests of Indonesia as an area the size of Pennsylvania was burned to make way for agriculture. Resident fruit bats lost their access to the tree's fruit and had no other option than to fly elsewhere in search for food, carrying with them a deadly disease. Not long after they resettled in an orchard in Malaysia, pigs around them started to become sick, alongside pig farmers. This was the start of the Nipah virus, which by 1999 left 265 people with severe brain inflammation and took the lives of 105 people. In this case, the slashing and burning of an Indonesian rainforest led to the destruction of a closed-off habitat within the rainforest, which contained animals that had co-evolved with the Nipah virus. This forced the animals to flee, and in the search for food, they inevitably began the spread to livestock and humans. The destruction of closed-off habitats within forests is recognized as a major point of emergence for these zoonotic viruses. And if the world's forests continue to be burnt down, this is going to happen more and more. Another example we can look at is the spread of malaria in the Amazon basin, which contains the Amazon rainforest and is in the borders of 6 countries. So disease ecologists Andy McDonald and Erin Mordecai did a study in the Amazon basin between 2003 and 2015, where they estimated that a 10% yearly increase in deforestation leads to a 3% increase in yearly malaria cases. In 1 year of the study, 1,600 square kilometers, which is nearly 300,000 football fields, of rainforest was deforested, and this was linked to an additional 10,000 cases of malaria. This disease kills hundreds of thousands of people every year. Malaria is transmitted through mosquitoes, and in this particular circumstance, mosquitoes were drawn to the outskirts of the forest as they were burnt down, as the edges became particularly shady and moist, and they loved that, apparently. So as these two of many examples show, there are different circumstances behind the emergence of different zoonotic viruses, but what links them together is deforestation, creating the conditions for otherwise elusive disease-carrying animals to leave their habitats and come into contact with us. Hang on, I just lost my place. Yeah, there are many more examples given in the articles I read and that are in that document, which will, so you can look at more specific examples there, but I just wanted to show 2 for the sake of brevity. So yeah, we have to ask, why is this deforestation taking place? The main drive behind deforestation is for the expansion of agricultural production, particularly the cultivation of what's known as cash crops, the especially profitable staple crops like wheat, rice, and palm oil. and this expansion necessarily requires deforestation. 12% of the world's land is currently used for agricultural production, which is 1.6 billion hectares, or just short of 4 billion acres. Many studies over the years have shown that the world's farmers produce enough food to feed a global population twice the size of their own, so about 14 billion people. However, agribusinesses still plan on bringing 1.4 billion more hectares of land into use for crop production alone by 2050, a process that would require a massive campaign of deforestation, representing not only a massive toll to the environment, but an inevitable unleashing of more zoonotic viruses as habitats get destroyed. It's safe to say that this expansion is not motivated by a need to produce more food. Instead, it's about the agribusiness's need to produce more profit. As we talked about in an earlier education, capitalist corporations like agribusinesses need to continually make a profit. And expand the size of their capital in order to sustain their position in a capitalist economy. Since these companies need more and more commodities to sell in order to maintain profits, a constantly increasing amount of nature must be transformed into sellable commodities all the time. So, mining companies have to extract more and more minerals, agribusinesses have to produce more and more crops, etc. As there is no other way to reproduce and expand the size of their capital and stop them going bust. Acres and acres of forests being burnt down so that acres and acres of wheat can be produced, despite the world already producing enough food for human consumption. This only makes sense with the understanding that agribusinesses only care about the profit that wheat returns, rather than whether or not it needs to be made or produced. This chase for a greater amount of profit has taken these agribusinesses all over the world, monopolizing farms in underdeveloped countries and utilizing their poverty for land grabs, which is something that Patrick is going to elaborate on in his introduction. So another significant role in not only the spread, but the actual danger of pathogens is the way that agriculture is organized in capitalist society. Of the 1.6 billion hectares of land currently in use for agricultural production, 0.54 billion of it is used for the production of just 3 crops: maize, rice, and wheat. This is known as monoculture, where land is transformed from being biologically diverse to consisting of just a single crop. It goes the same for animal agriculture, as a massive amount of the same species get reared in the same tight space. This environmentally and genetically homogeneous form of agriculture actually favors the emergence of new pathogens that get specialized to a specific host, whether it's a crop or a cow. And they become much more virulent than their wild counterparts. The homogeneity makes pathogen transmission easier, and it increases the likelihood for the plant or animal to carry multiple strains of the same pathogen, as it's given the opportunity to mutate and develop in an environment which has been stripped away of its natural defenses or immune systems that would hinder the virulent growth. The use of pesticides in agricultural production kills off the less virulent strains of the virus, which also contributes to that sort of, that development and mutation of these pathogens. The disease biologist Andy Wallace, who's also the author of a book called Big Farms Make Big Flu, whose articles and interviews I read to get the more sciencey side of the introduction, said that, quote, "There are no capital-free pathogens at this point, because global agriculture has become monopolized by agribusinesses, and the methods of agriculture that provide the most profit are also the worst for the spreading of zoonotic viruses." Andy Wallace, when asked about the origins of COVID-19, said that the focus on wet markets, which is a very scary way of saying fresh food markets, such as the one in China, which many cases of COVID-19 trace back to, he said that's missing the point. He said, how far back and how widely should we investigate? The focus on the wet market misses the origins of wild agriculture out in the hinterlands and its increasing capitalization, which I think is an important point. The lack of blame being pointed at capital's use and abuse of nature has allowed the agribusiness industry to go completely off the hook for its role in allowing viruses to emerge. And in place of this blame, we've had articles and news broadcasts about how the virus must have originated from the centuries-old diet of Chinese people, giving many people the impression that other people should be blamed for the virus and not capital, which is acting with complete irreverence towards the future of humanity. To this effect, Andy Wallace makes the argument that the disease hotspots are London, New York, and Hong Kong, as they are the sources of capital investment in agribusiness. So to conclude, there are 500 million forest-dependent people living in the world right now, 200 million of which are indigenous. And as agribusinesses, with the backing of banks, plan on ploughing their way through these forests for no other reason than the need to expand their capital and make more profit, they will not only be burning down the basis of millions of lives, burning down the vestiges of a healthy ecosystem, but also unleashing deadly viruses like COVID-19, which has gripped the world and taken the lives of hundreds of thousands already. And I think we have a role to play in fighting this. We have the potential to build a movement with the consciousness to hold not just the banks and the agribusinesses, but the entire capitalist system accountable. The system that has decided that human lives, much like nature, are below profit. And with that, I will pass over to Patrick.
So to follow from Anna's introduction, I'll be talking about the link between agribusiness, deforestation, and capitalism. The demand for profits by agribusiness is the leading cause of deforestation, contributing to 80% of all deforestation. This increase in agricultural land is not there to alleviate world hunger, as global agriculture already produces enough food to feed twice the current human population. Therefore, the boost in agricultural land is solely to meet the increasing demands for profits. Major corporations are the ones responsible for this drive in deforestation, and in doing so have become monopolies in the food industry, creating a decrease in the number of farms but increasing the average farm size. This monopolization of agribusiness allows companies like Bayer, Monsanto, and Dow DuPont to have a greater say in local policy, get away with more deforestation, and the use of toxic pesticides. Imperialist countries also impose intensive agriculture to underdeveloped countries to increase the profits of these monopolies. Countries in Africa have decreased the tax on agribusinesses to attract them to their countries. In Brazil, the president made a huge decrease in environmental violations, which then led to a burning of nearly 3,000 square kilometers of the Amazon. This decrease in funds will appeal to agro-capitalists and bring more money into the country. Imperialist countries like the UK, USA, and China are also responsible for the destruction of forests in underdeveloped countries by using predatory loans to put these countries into massive unpayable debt, forcing these countries to use up the natural resources to develop. Under the domination of the imperialist and capitalist countries, there is no way for these countries to sustainably develop. The World Bank's enabling of the Business of Agriculture project, which is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and multiple imperialist governments, aims to expand agribusiness in Africa via the takeover of land to be used for commercial agriculture, open them up to import markets, and the privatization of seed systems. Britain and the US, among other major businesses, fund the Southern Agricultural Corridor in Tanzania. Tanzania has promised to give away 10 million hectares. This land that is being given away whilst the land is still in use by farmers who have no legal claims to the land and have no access to lawyers, meaning that thousands are being driven off their land with no compensation. 56 billion hectares of land in Africa has been handed over through this process already. Alternatively, an example of deforestation working outside of a capitalist economy is in socialist Cuba. where they allow the clearing of areas for mining, but after doing so, they have to replace the trees they cut down within the next 2 years. This practice has led to an increase of forest coverage in Cuba from 13 to 31%, making a more sustainable use of the land and environment. In Cuba, mining is state-led, which allows this level of sustainable planning, whereas previously mentioned imperialist corporations do whatever they want with the land they have purchased in poorer nations. In summary, large companies have monopolized the production of food and are using their power and influence to increase their profits via the use of land grabs, patented seed systems, and relying on right-wing pro-capitalist governments like Bolsonaro's to reduce funds and taxes for deforestation and environmental destruction in underdeveloped countries.
Good first intro ever, Pat. Give it up for Pat.
Nicely done, both of you. That's really interesting. Thank you very much for putting all the effort into researching, putting that together and sharing that with us today.